Welcome back, Carrie.
Thank you, Leah. I'm so excited to talk with you again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You're so much fun.
I feel the same way. I'm excited for this conversation.
Okay, so this time we're gonna skip the intro.
Deal.
I'm gonna link our last episode in the description so people can look that up there. So let's start with hormone health and how light can actually play into that.
Yeah, sure. You know, with hormone imbalance is a real thing these days. I think it's gotten pretty astronomical. From young ages all the way through, right? You know, even postmenopausally. And so there's got to be something that's driving all of this hormone imbalance. And certainly there is a chemical component to it. You know, we are surrounded by thousands of more chemicals than the human body was ever meant to encounter. And a lot of those chemicals can drive some hormone imbalances, right? We call them endocrine disruptors. They can mimic estrogen, for example, and kind of throw hormones out of whack that way. And so while there is a chemical component to hormone imbalance, I think that people need to realize that light exposure can drive hormone balance or imbalance. And so we can use the natural light cycle to balance our hormones. And when we don't, artificial light, especially at the wrong times, can really lead to some major hormone imbalances. And so I would love to dive into any of that if you're ready.
Yeah. Okay. Let's first start with what a hormone imbalance is, especially for, let's say, women.
Yeah, sure. So if we were to, let's talk about a woman who's still fertile, right? Who's still ovulating. We would go through periods where we're supposed to see these rises in estrogen and progesterone and these drops. And they happen very purposefully. There's different surges, if you will, to basically promote the release of an egg from a follicle. Then there's a few days in there where that follicle, that egg can become fertilized, right? And then we've got time for that egg to implant. And then, you know, if that egg implants successfully, that's where the start of a pregnancy. Now, we're seeing a lot of issues these days with what's called anovulatory cycles, which means a woman is not ovulating regularly. We see a lot of issues with excessive amounts of estrogen or too little progesterone or just an imbalance in those hormones that can really prevent someone from having these nice cycles. And we're talking about these cycles whether one is looking to get pregnant or not, right? These are just healthy fluctuations, monthly fluctuations that we want the body to go through on a pretty much a 28-day-ish basis. And when it doesn't, that's a stress. It's a signal that the body is under stress of some sort. Because when things are imbalanced, the whole purpose of the human body, unfortunately, right, make a baby and pass those genes on, right? That's what we're looking to do. We're looking to survive and make babies. And so when we're not ovulating regularly and when we're not having this balanced 28-day cycle, it's a signal that the body is under stress.
Okay. So how would a woman, let's say, know that her cycle is not optimal? Because, you know, we always think everything that we experience is normal. So...
Right. There's a difference between common and normal, right? Because a lot of these symptoms that I'm going to tell you about are common, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're normal. So, number one, libido actually says a lot, right? So one's libido, we should have a stronger libido in that window of time where we've released an egg and it has the opportunity to become fertilize. So there's like a little 4-ish day, even week-long window in there where we should feel a surge in libido. I'm hearing of younger and younger women with really tanked libidos. So that's a sign that the body might be under stress and not having the right hormone balance to drive appropriate sex drive and or sustain, a pregnancy. And so hence the body kind of down-regulates libido. Another thing we look at is mood fluctuations. So while there is the potential to feel not always our tip-top self, like let's say a couple of days leading up to our cycle,
Right.
it's not supposed to come with these massive swings of highs and lows and highs and lows. It's not supposed to come with these feelings of inflammation, or what I'm hearing a lot is kind of like this impending anxiety. I'm hearing a lot more people talking to me about anxiety and depression that gets really, really rampant in association with leading up to bleeding. So that's where it's like, wait a second, just because we're hearing it a lot, it's like you said, it's common, but it's not normal. And so we have to then ask ourselves, what am I exposing my body to that's maybe causing me to have hormone imbalance such as these?
Okay. And so we indirectly, right, we would know what the opposite of the unhealth is, which so we can think about what health is. But just so we can clarify it even more, how is a healthy cycle supposed to feel like?
It's not supposed to feel like a whole heck of a lot different than, except for the fact there is a time in the month where there is a surge in desire to make a baby, right? Like there is that surge. And then, but the time leading up to a menstrual cycle, plus the menstrual cycle itself, it shouldn't be this traumatic experience or this mood swings, pain, cramping, excessively heavy bleeding. All of those things are really the body saying, wait a second, something's off. So in a healthy, one of the things that we can assess is, okay, how long is it between when I first start my period to when I get a change in my vaginal fluid viscosity? So we should get, our vaginal fluid should really thin out and makes it easier for sperm to basically swim. And so we should get that, let's say 10 to 14 days afterwards. That should be in conjunction with a desire to make a baby. And then it's okay.
Make yourself pretty, right?
Right. Okay, let's
when
do
you
this.
dress better.
Let's go. And there are like these kind of other, like unseen phenomenon that happen. Women do have there is lots of sociological research to show that when a woman is ovulating, she will spend a little bit more time on her appearance. Her waist actually, the dimension of her waist actually shrinks. She forms more of an hourglass figure. So it's interesting, right? It's kind of cool. And then if ovulation doesn't lead to fertilization, then okay, that desire kind of starts to wane as we get into bleeding. And that is generally going to happen in about a 28-day cycle, oftentimes in conjunction with the lunar cycle, the moon, where you see leading up to near the full moon, that's where ovulation takes place. And then leading to when the woman's going to start to bleed, that's towards the new moon. So it doesn't always sync up that way, but oftentimes it actually there is a lunar connection to it. And like I said,
I just had a thought.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
We'll see what you think about it. I never thought about this before. But, right, so you would ovulate on the full moon when it's brighter, which means you're awake probably longer, which gives you more time to make a baby.
They actually they're thinking that. They say it's
almost
really? There's this less desire to sleep, more desire to be active at that time. 100%. You hit the nail on the head on that. Yeah. It leads for people to kind of do more, they also find like risky behavior, if you will, because, just this desire to be out there and be doing, and less like into kind of like the hibernation. Okay. I just kind of want to stay. And then, during the first few days of my cycle, it's like, I just kind of want to hunker down, Yeah. And so there is that, right? There is a fluctuation that's seen with that. And so it's really cool that you picked up on that, because there is research that shows exactly that.
Oh, that's so fun.
I know. It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. And so then the one other thing I wanted to address is this idea of the length of cycle. Now, does one have to have a perfect 28-day cycle? No. But we should have consistency. So when I'm working with someone who has imbalances, they're going to tell me this month it was 27 days, next month it's 35 days, then it's 30 days, then it's 26 days, right? Like this kind of inconsistency, that to me indicates that there is also some imbalance happening, oftentimes due to stress. like some form of a stressor, and that stressor could be mental, but there's also physical stressors that the body can go through that would experience that.
Okay. So what are those stressors?
There's a lot, right? So a very common one is any form of mental stress, right? So there is the stress of a deadline at work, a challenging relationship, a traumatic experience. And then so those would be more of the mental stressors. The other stressors would be something along the lines of a lot of travel, right? Traveling or changing time zones and having to get back to it. That can shift one's period. You could also experience excessive exercise, right? Like you're doing too much.
So common. So common. Oh, horrible.
And do you want to know what we are tying that to? Is lots and lots of fasting, right? Because we hear that it's good for us, which it is. But in a woman who is fertile, we want to fast only so much. But if the fasting starts to affect our cycles, that makes it a stressor. So you can monitor, like, am I fasting appropriately or doing intermittent fasting appropriately for my body? If your cycles are regular, if you're experiencing a surge in libido, your vaginal fluid is changing, like, okay, great. But if not, then you have to ask yourself, like, do I need to shift my intermittent fasting habits? Which I have to do that with women who are especially experiencing infertility. They've kind of been thought that, I gotta go through autophagy, clean my eggs, get healthier. And so it's like fast, and it ends up being too stressful to the body. And then lastly, a poor circadian rhythm, which we talked all about light before, right? But that in and of itself, if the body isn't set in its timing mechanism, it's gonna throw off the entire month, right? It's not just a day-to-day thing. It goes into bigger cycles than that.
So what kind of hormones are set off, let's say, in the morning?
Yeah,
when it's done properly.
It's a great question. So I love this, right? Because my focus is oftentimes on light. I talk about mitochondria. I talk about water. I talk about, but light and mitochondria go together because a lot of people are unaware that these mitochondria make the main sex hormone for us in response to early morning light. So so here's the deal, right? I could actually show you pictures of the different light frequencies at different times of the morning. You can get your spectrometer out, which I have, and kind of like see what colors of light are there. And before sunrise, you're going to see mostly red and infrared, like the warmer tones. At sunrise, there's a sudden surge of the blue light. And it's that exact blend. It's like when that ratio, when that blue starts to meet the red and the infrared, that's a signal to the clock in my brain to tell my hypothalamus, to tell my mitochondria to make pregnenolone. And if we don't get that signal consistently, we're not driving that pregnenolone production. Pregnenolone can then become cortisol, which we need in the morning to give us a little energy surge. But that pregnenolone then can also become estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA. Like all of the sex hormones come from that main hormone that's made in the mitochondria in response to morning light. So can you imagine how many of us kind of miss out on that just because we don't realize the importance of going out near sunrise to get that signal to enter our eyes?
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. Everybody. The initial signal that we all get, and I was guilty of it, so no judgment, is what do? We wake up and we look right at our phone. And that phone is an intense surge of blue with no red. And so we're getting a blue signal. So we're kind of like, should we start this production? Shouldn't we? What's going on? It's a confusing signal. We're not signaling our circadian rhythm appropriately. We're not signaling our mitochondria appropriately. And that just kind of sets the stage for hormone imbalance.
Oh, this reminds me. So a few years ago, I actually sometimes used my phone to get me going. So I used the blue light from the phone to stress myself to get going. So I need to wake up. It's like, look at the light. And then it's like, okay, I can do it now.
And so it will work because you're going to get a surge of cortisol there, right? That's what you're getting, is that surge of cortisol to kind of rev you up for the day. But it's not balanced, right? It's like you're doing it whenever you wake up. So maybe it's at sunrise, maybe it's 2 hours before sunrise, maybe it's 2 hours after sunrise. When we get that light in the morning, let's say from sunrise till an hour later, right? So like an hour window. When we get a light into our eyes in that window, we're getting the perfect signal, the balanced signal to start our circadian rhythm, to start telling our mitochondria to make pregnenolone that will. Now, here's the other deal, right? Is that these days, our body has to kind of decide, is Carrie in a position, is she in a state where there's little stress and food is plentiful for her to be able to get, basically ovulate, have fertilization happen, and then grow a baby. And so if I'm in a state of stress, which that excessive blue light, that's a stress signal. So while we may start to kind of release some hormones, we're going to get massively more cortisol. And when we start to funnel that pregnenolone more towards the cortisol pathway, stress, do you think my body's going to want to make a baby? No. My mitochondria are like, Carrie, we don't even know what time of day it is. We don't know if Carrie has food in her environment. Let's just kind of sound the alarm, funnel more of that pregnenolone to cortisol, like really surge her cortisol stress hormone up and down-regulate fertility. So that's why I'm seeing across the board low hormone levels in people. Like, and if there is kind of a surge, it's an imbalance in estrogen from all the chemicals that we're exposed to. But we're just too stressed out. And a lot of it is because we're not getting light signals the right way. We're not balancing our hormone production with light.
Okay. So can you say, so for example, somebody gets up after sunrise and misses that red light timing, but gets out after that. Do you think would you consider that a stressor, or just, like you missed a step and that's kind of like keeping you on a level down? Am I explaining myself?
Yes, you are. And it could, depending on how consistently one does that becomes the issue. If you always miss that morning light, that's probably ultimately detrimental to total hormone balance in the body. But if every once in a while you sleep in, and when you do wake up, it's an hour after sunrise, and as long as you don't pick up that phone first and turn on all the lights in the house or stare at the TV screen, as long as whenever you wake up you do go outside, the human body is intelligent. We can sync back up. It's like, okay, yeah, we do need to surge cortisol a little bit. Carrie missed that window, but let's rebalance things out. But oftentimes we just don't do that, and so the habit that needs to change is staring at that phone screen without some form of protection, whether it's the orange tone blue blockers or like a red screen filter on our phone screen, right? If we take out that big surge of blue, then we can use our phone. If we keep the house dim in the morning before sunrise, then we can. It's okay, right? We can incorporate modern living with it. We just have to recognize that light signaling needs to be synced. And so just do a couple of things to mitigate that with morning light. Block the artificial until sunrise, and then go outside in that first hour of sunlight and just sync it up. Sync it all up, and your body's really intelligent. It'll start to be like, oh, okay, I know what time of day it is. Yeah, let's get these hormones rolling, et cetera, et cetera.
It's really cool. It's so simple at the end of the day, right?
Simple. It is so simple, and I run a fertility course with a colleague, Sarah Kleiner, and we see women who have been trying to conceive for years, right? Have gone through failed IVF after failed IVF. Oh. The amount of people who conceive when they've gone through everything, right? All these supplements and testing, it's like, and all of a sudden they start to incorporate light. They time their meals so that their body feels safe. And it's like, voila, that's the magic formula. And they get pregnant. So it's not like, and that happens significantly. It's not like it's a shot in the dark. And when you're dealing with women who have literally spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on reproductive therapies, and all of a sudden it's about the light, you realize it really is simple. It really could just be that they need to sync back up with the light, and it happens.
It's a little dumbfounding, don't you think?
It is. It seems too good to be true, right? That's exactly what it is. But the cool part about this is that, like, the reason why I love preaching about the light is because it's free. It's accessible.
Yes.
You know, it's not like, oh, Carrie is selling me a bottle, $100 bottle of whatever, X supplement that I need to take for the rest of my life to feel healthy. It's like, no, you know, I don't make money telling everyone here to go outside. But it's because I've seen it in clinical practice work so many times that I'm just excited, and I want to encourage people, because it's a missing step in a lot of people's healing journey. It's a missing step in, if someone's just trying to maintain health, it's a missing step, and it's so powerful.
What is there other hormones that get released later in the day?
Well, not necessarily later in the day, but there's other hormones tied to hormone balance that need this morning light.
Okay.
Specifically, thyroid hormone does as well. So there's a
okay.
connection between getting that morning light. And so for thyroid hormone, it's more like between sunrise and 2 or 3 hours later in that morning window of time that you can really maximize thyroid hormone levels with the morning light. So thyroid hormone is responsive to it. And then what we need to kind of look at in terms of the end of the day is that there is this kind of, like, I would call it like a hormone surge, right? For everyone with this morning. And, you know, even in men, right? If you test their testosterone on a circadian basis, their surge is timed exactly with what I'm talking about. It's around 9 o'clock in the morning, right? It's a morning surge. So we all have kind of like this surge of hormones in the morning that are our sex hormones. And then they kind of start to funnel off throughout the day, or kind of distribute themselves throughout the day. And then what we're supposed to do at sunset, that's when the blue light in our environment goes away. It's the signal that, okay, no, this is not the time for fertilization. This is the time for regeneration and repair. And so a whole other set of repair hormones start to surge, right? We start to get melatonin. We start to make human growth hormone, and other hormones that we can regenerate our tissues. But unfortunately, when we shine artificial light into our eyes at night, we get a secondary stimulus that it's morning. So we start to see there's a massive correlation, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of research articles now showing a connection between artificial light at night, including shift work, and hormone-driven cancers. So you are way more likely to get breast cancer, to prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, if you're exposed to artificial light at night. And so now that we recognize that it's blue light, this initial signal of blue light that kind of surges these hormones for us in the morning, you could imagine that as that blue light is going away at the end of the day, and then all of a sudden, I stare at my phone screen again, or I turn on every light in the house, or I stare at a television screen, that we're going to get another artificial confusing surge of these hormones, and they're at the wrong time of day, at the time of day that we're supposed to be repairing our body and going through actually some cleaning up of cancer. Even it's called apoptosis and autophagy. We're supposed to do that, and if we're not, these hormones have the ability to drive cancer in different tissues. So it's tied to the light in so many ways, and it like I said, it's simple. That just means after sunset, block them again. Use the orange tones, right? Use orange tone blue blockers just to prevent the light, the blue light from entering your eyes. It really is simple, but I've seen hormones balance themselves out so beautifully when people do this.
Oh, I got the orange glasses to it. They're great.
Yeah, don't they feel so calming at night? It's like,
oh, it's so good. Yes, because I had the yellow ones first, and it's like, oh, wow. But then I tried the orange, and I was like, oh, ooh.
I know. It's like the nervous system at night can start to calm down. It's like, okay, it's nighttime is here. It's a time to kind of settle in, right? It's a really, really cool effect.
Yes. Oh, do you have the red ones too?
I do. Oh, here. So like the company that I have right now are the Viva Rays. And so I've got the orange tone ones and red. They're clip on basically. They can just snap on. The majority of people, if you want to just try this out, I recommend orange. After sunset, or, maybe within an hour or two after sunset, clip on the oranges, because the oranges prevent any artificial blue light in your environment from entering your eyes and kind of kicking off these hormone cascades. Some people are sensitive to blue and green wavelengths of light. So my clients who say, oh, Carrie, I get this second surge of energy until midnight, and then I have a hard time falling asleep before 2 a.m. You need red. You need orange at sunset, and then you need red for about an hour or so before your desired bedtime. Because this really forces, or not forces, it just tells your brain it's darkness, and your pineal gland just makes massive amounts of melatonin. You couldn't stay up if you tried, right? Like, these people are like, what? My insomnia, I've literally had people be like, I've had insomnia for years, and now all of a sudden I can go to sleep at a normal time. It's so cool. So cool.
You cut out a second.
Oh, okay. Oh, I said what I was saying was that I've literally had clients with that insomnia for years who all of a sudden, after wearing the red, they go to sleep at a normal time. And it's just so rewarding and so cool to hear. And I mean, it happens within days of them using it.
Oh, I had the same experience. The yellow ones reduced my time for like half an hour. And then the orange one, an hour to a half earlier. But I might get the red one too now. Yeah,
it might be worth it just to try them, because honestly, melatonin is so important. I could give a whole talk on melatonin alone, and we want our body to make it, right, if at all possible. And so the eyes just have to essentially say it's dark. And as soon as my eyes tell my brain it's dark with those red tone glasses, that melatonin just goes sky high in the blood, and that puts us to sleep and then sets up all the repair at night while we are asleep.
Yes, and it becomes hard to stay awake, right?
Yes, that's a good sign, right? I tell my clients, like, you have to honor your fatigue. You have to be prepared. Like, I know you classify yourself as a night owl, right? You're that person who can stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden you're falling asleep at 10. It's like, you have to honor that, because that's actually you all of a sudden getting back in touch with a natural circadian rhythm.
Yes, it's so bizarre when you couldn't sleep in the past.
I know. I get it. Like, I had insomnia for a period of time in my life, and I know it was tied to screen usage. And it was the first time I lived by myself, and so at night I flipped on every light in the house, right? And the TV was always on as my company. Right, and so it was easy to be like, oh, I can't fall asleep before 3 o'clock in the morning, and no wonder, right? No wonder.
Yeah, no wonder, yeah. But you always learn later.
You always learn later, right? It's a learning journey. It's a
journey. So back to fertility. Is water connected to the whole process too?
Water is connected, simply because our mitochondria make water for us. Mm-hmm. And so most people think that the water that we drink is it, right? It's like, that's how we stay hydrated. And while the water that we drink matters, right? We got some, oh, look at you, Clarivia right there. We got some good water. So while water does matter, our mitochondria water production matters more. So if our mitochondria are in a state of high function, because we have a strong circadian rhythm, because we're not exposing ourselves to tons of inflammation, and things that kind of detract from mitochondrial health, they make water for us. And if we want to dive down that rabbit hole, that water actually becomes a battery of energy inside of our cells. It's something that the mitochondria say, oh yeah, if we have enough energy in our body, right? If our mitochondria sense Carrie's got tons of energy, then of course I'm in a better position to grow a baby, right? And so I'm more likely to have balanced fertility, like have fertile cycles, with balanced hormones, because it's not like, oh no, Carrie's in this weird starvation state, or she's in this weird state of threat. No, energy is plentiful. And so the water makes a difference that my mitochondria make. And so does a hormone called leptin, which is like a hormone that nobody talks about, but it is so key. And it has a bit of a circadian component to it as well that I think is important for people to understand.
So what is leptin? What does it do?
Leptin is a hormone that's actually released from our body fat cells. And this is kind of like the evolution.
Oh no, fat.
I know, right? Thank you. This is the evolution of fat. Because when I was in undergrad, undergrad studying biology, it was like fat, right? This pinchable fat, right? Fat's just a storage blob, right? It's just it's just like a place where you store energy, and it doesn't do anything, and it's just kind of a nuisance, but it's there. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We now know that fat is an endocrine organ. It makes and releases hormones. And one of the most important hormones that it makes is called leptin. And leptin is a hormone that when it's released from fat and it docks into the hypothalamus, so again, there's that hypothalamus again. When it docks into the hypothalamus, it basically gives my brain a download of all of the energy that I have. It would basically say, Carrie's got this much body fat, she's got this much sugar stored in her muscles, she's got this much energy in reserve. And then what my body does with that information is it says, okay, how hungry should Carrie be? How desperate should we kind of make her feel for seeking food and seeking nutrients? Or how calm can we make her? Because all is copacetic and everything is fine. And so if leptin can dock, we start to get adequate hunger signals. We start to get adequate satiety signals. Okay, Carrie's full. Don't waste any energy seeking food because no, she's got this much body fat stored. She just had a meal, And so leptin signaling is key. And leptin does its main signaling at night. In darkness when we're asleep. Around midnight, leptin wants to be released from body fats. So essentially we've stopped eating, right? So because if we've eaten this kind of late at night, it throws us off. So we're done eating, we've processed that food. The body fat can then send a signal of leptin to the hypothalamus to be like, okay, boom, here was Carrie's energy status for the day. And this is where she's at. And then if leptin can do that, in the morning, as I'm making this surge of hormones, right, my mitochondria are helping to make this surge of hormones, they know that, oh, Carrie's got, she's not starving. She's got a healthy amount of body fat with which we can draw from in order to sustain a pregnancy. And so if leptin can signal appropriately also, and there has to be darkness and there has to be a certain cutoff of food at night, if leptin can signal appropriately, then that's another component of my body feeling at peace and in a safe space to basically grow a baby. And so my body will optimize fertility for that.
So you mentioned to stop eating at night. Like how early, or is it again tied to the sunset?
It always is tied to the sunset. So on average, our digestive system's function starts to slow down after about 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Now, sometimes it's a little earlier. So for example, where I live, the sun sets around 5, right? So that's going to actually start a little bit earlier. That shutdown will start earlier. In the middle of the summer here, when the sun sets after 9 p.m., that's going to start a little bit later, right? So there is wiggle room. But what a lot of women, because they, like I said, there's this anxiety, right? There's this feeling of anxiety that oftentimes gets calmed by carbohydrates. So I have a lot of women who are like, well, at bedtime, I just have a bowl of popcorn, or I eat a couple cookies, or, something that unfortunately elevates insulin. And insulin and leptin compete in the brain. If insulin is there, if insulin is elevated at night, leptin won't dock. So imagine eating food at like 10 o'clock at night, right? 9, 10 o'clock at night.
It's very common, yes.
Very common. Insulin is still elevated. So when leptin gets released and tries to communicate to the brain, the message never gets delivered. So essentially, I wake up in the morning and it's like, Carrie's starving. Carrie's in a state of stress. Carrie's not in a safe place to make a baby. Let's get her maybe craving some carbohydrates. Let's give her a surge of cortisol to elevate that blood sugar, right? And so it just drives hormone imbalance when leptin can't make that communication into the brain.
See, so in that case, food is important, right?
In that case, food is important, and in that case, it's more about the timing of food. There are certain macronutrient blends or ratios that we could look at to optimize leptin, but based on circadian research in terms of meal timing, and the leptin research in terms of meal timing, all of it indicates that we are meant to eat basically from sunrise till 8 or 9 hours later. Like that is optimum. So basically, oftentimes sunrise till sunset, right? Or slightly shorter.
Yes.
And when we do that, it's healthier for our inflammation. It's healthier for all metabolic parameters. And it also is healthier for leptin signaling. And so it just indicates to me that while a lot of us in this intermittent fasting that have done intermittent fasting, which I did like for forever, right? It's like, I can just drink a cup of coffee and then go until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon before I eat my first meal. That actually will dysregulate leptin signals quite a bit, and it can dysregulate hormones. So every once in a while, is it beneficial? Yes. But if someone is having hormone imbalance, and also, especially if they're trying to conceive, you have to tell your body that food is plentiful. Food is available. You have plenty of energy to grow a baby. And that happens with signaling at night and then consuming a meal around first thing in the morning, right after sunrise or so, again, to reinforce that signal. Yeah, food is plentiful. So then my mitochondria and my body goes, okay, let's optimize fertility.
Mm-hmm. So what happens if, let's say, I watch TV at night without any blue filters and then I get hungry at like 10 and eat again. So what's happening there with the hormones?
That artificial light at night surges your cortisol. It's going to suppress your melatonin. So while you were once potentially starting to feel sleepy, you'll get a second wind. Your brain will essentially tell you it's the start of a day again. Like, oh, I thought the day was ended, but no, now we're in like the middle of the afternoon. It's bright enough with that light to be the middle of the day, and that you need to fuel your activities. So it will promote like food seeking behaviors. It will help, it'll drive cravings. And sometimes actually consuming something that's carbohydrate rich actually is the body's compensatory mechanism to kind of calm the nervous system down, calm things down. It's like there's a calming effect to carbohydrates in a lot of people. And so, but then those carbohydrates get consumed, you elevate insulin, and insulin's going to block leptin. And all of a sudden, you basically have gone a day without leptin telling your brain what your energy status is. So you dysregulate your hunger signals, and you dysregulate your hormone balance for the next day.
Could this, or is this enough to make somebody infertile over the long run?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Oh wow.
Absolutely.
It sounds so benign.
It does, but something has to explain the rampant rise in infertility that we're seeing over the course of the past 2 decades, beyond just the food, right? Because a lot of people, once they come to Sarah and I, they've gone the food route, right? They cleaned up everything in their diet. They recognize that their beauty products and their personal care products and their cleaning products may have been toxic, endocrine disruptors. And they're still not getting pregnant. There's still something, another layer. And so, well, is it everybody? No. And are there people who live this exact lifestyle that I'm talking about, like you don't want to live and still get pregnant? Yes, they do. But for people who are trying to conceive and have been trying, and if they don't recognize that light can play a massive role and leptin can play a massive role, they're missing out on a big strategy to support their fertility journey. Your brain is working. I love it.
Yes. Let's let it work for a second.
Sure.
So what about the younger women? Because if you're, I don't know, women get stressed after 30, right? Usually. So let's say if you're in your 20s and already there you're having difficulties.
Well, okay, so here's what we're seeing. And one of my colleagues, Bastian, who has an app that I use to track circadian rhythm, the Circadian app, he just posted this research article today. And I might even link it, below, or if you want to send it out to the listeners, because what it shows is that what's called social jet lag, right? Social
jet lag.
Yeah, it's because when I was in my 20s, I was out at the bar, right, and I was up late, and I was either up late studying or out late at a party, or it was just late. Going to bed before 2:00 in the morning was very rare at that time of my life. And now people have done the research to be like, is that damaging? Is that harmful? It drives up massive amounts of inflammation. And so can you imagine if the body gets this threat of inflammation, it's not going to want to optimize fertility. There's a bigger stressor, there's a bigger threat that needs to be addressed. If one's inflammatory markers are chronically elevated, that's not supportive of fertility. So we see that, and don't underestimate actually a big driver of this conversation that again could be a whole podcast. And it's a hard thing for me. This is a hard thing for me to say, but artificial hormones, birth control, right? That actually can be a major hormone dysregulator too. If you continually tell the body, you essentially force the body to think you're pregnant all the time, right? You really kind of dysregulate your hormones in such a way. Sometimes that in and of itself will tank libido. That in and of itself will drive other hormone imbalances. And let's say someone who was through their 20s was on birth control. Now all of a sudden they want to try to conceive and they come off birth control. That's another whole hurdle. We have to get your system back on track because it has not been producing natural hormone cycles for a decade or more at that point. And that's a whole nother factor that can get taken into consideration.
Oh, yes. I think it's horrible that young girls just get given the pill just like that. I now knowing what I know about the pill, it's like yowzers, right? But it's hard too because I don't know where it goes. I have a young daughter, and I think to myself, well, I don't want her pregnant at 15, right, or 18, or 20, or I hopefully she'll make smart choices in her life. But God forbid, right? That there's the potential, right? There's always the potential there. And women happen to take on the brunt of that, right? It's like when you're the one who is the person who is growing the baby, that becomes an extra layer of responsibility. And so I really, really hope that there's alternatives that are non-hormonal and non-toxic, that people start to think about that. Because is there the need potentially for birth control? There is. But is hormonal birth control something I would ever consider for myself or for my daughter? Yeah. There are better options.
There are better options. There are.
Yes,
absolutely.
And also, you're not fertile the whole month.
Correct.
Many
people forget that. That's another thing that I think birth control dysregulates, is this idea of tracking your cycle. Tracking, it's really important. You can do that with your body temperature. You can do that. You can do that with the vaginal, right? That's a huge sign. You can do it with a couple of other ways. There's obviously for clients who are trying to conceive, they use ovulation trackers and things. But the more we can start to get young girls who start to have their periods, if we can get them in, really in tune with what their cycle is like, and what their days where they are more fertile, their days where they're not. I think that's just an important thing for everyone to know in general.
Yes. I think it comes down to education, right?
100%.
If you know your body, you're less likely to do something that's damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's like, I feel like it's just a topic we don't talk about a ton. It's like, yes, you get your period, here's what you do then, but we don't talk about the rest of the month. We don't talk about, okay, you might have higher energy and a higher sex drive here. You might have lower energy and feel a little bit, kind of like a homebody here. We don't talk about the rest of the month. And I think we really need to talk about the rest of the month. You're right. That's a missing factor in a lot of.
Yes. So let's leave this as a kind of cliffhanger for next time, maybe.
Yeah, because next time we need to talk about water. We absolutely need to go back and revisit that water, because it is a massive source of energy for the body.
Yes. So how can people find out more about you, work with you, all the places they...
the best place still is my Instagram hub, right, where I post regularly, and my link tree in my Instagram bio has all of my upcoming courses, my previous courses. It's just a really great place to kind of see what's going on, what I'm offering, and if you're interested, diving deeper into this information.
So cool. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank
for
you.
being
So nice
back here.
to meet you.
Yes.